Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
Last week, the internet ate our class. We missed, so it's gone. Try to recover it, but we can't. I'm going to try to summarize very briefly what we did last week, and we'll have a look at this week, and then we're going to be off for 4 weeks, count them, 4 weeks, and we will resume on July 22. Off for 4 weeks, resuming July 22. Sometimes I think people come and go, I should take the whole summer off, so I'll let people vote on that. I'll let Michael decide, but I think we'll resume July 22. So we've been talking about Rav Kook. We had about 2 or 3 sessions on Rav Kook. I'm going to review briefly, and then we're going to do another session with another portion for Rav Kook, and then we're going to be that'll be done. We'll be finished with Rav Kook, and then July 22nd we'll start with other moderns. Rav Kook, just to review, chief rabbi of Mandatory Palestine, Ashkenazi chief rabbi before the state was established, chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael before the state was established, was a mystic, and we read in our first selection from Rav Kook about how basically the soul is from God and the soul yearns to return to God, and there is an inevitability of the soul longing for God. I want to very briefly go over, because the internet ate our class from last week, what we looked at last week. Okay, I'm screen sharing. Okay, Michael, wave your hand if you see something. Okay, good. All right. And the point of what we read last week, which is what I'm going to post last week's handout and this week's handout with the podcast, was that because the purpose of the soul is rejoining God, therefore, when we pray, it is our soul reaching out of the joy of trying to connect with God, as opposed to asking God for anything, right? Prayer does not desire to change a single thing within divinity. His word for divinity is Elohut, okay? But rather, the whole purpose of prayer is just to rise up, okay? The soul longs to rise up. Superficially, the words may seem to be saying, God, we're asking you to do something, bring hostages home, heal the sick, help me make a living, okay? But that's not actually true. All we're doing, I don't want to say all we're doing, what we're actually doing is we are elevating the soul towards God, and that the impact of prayer is on us, okay, to accomplish our moral completion. I'm near the top of page 2 in the handout, okay? And the purpose of everything is to remove the darkness, enhance the light, and the light is the divine realm. It is light, it is goodness, and our job in praying is that our soul wants to rise up towards that and strengthen it, okay? Strengthen it, and that's part of the Kabbalistic thing for Rav Kook, back to ideas of the Zohar or the Ari, that what we do down below actually does relate to up above and actually strengthens the forces of divinity in the universe. Again, very different from the Maimonidean idea that God is untouched by anything we do and God is unchanging. The Kabbalistic idea, which Rav Kook follows along with, what we do is a task of, again, you can think of it as strengthening the light or elevating our light to the light above in air quotes, it's metaphor, so that we're strengthening the light, we're strengthening divine realm, and the soul is only seeking to do this, not actually to ask God for anything. That's what we talked about last week. Okay, Rav Kook part 3 this week. Okay, Rav Kook is talking about, I'd be very interesting to hear how this strikes people, although it looks like people this morning is Michael. Rav Kook starts here with the reasonably well-known idea, I'm sure some of you have heard this, which is that the Midrash says, or the Talmud says midrashically, the patriarch Avraham instituted the Shachrit or morning prayer. Mincha was instituted. Michael, you don't have to read it yet. Don't worry about it. Mincha was instituted by Isaac, Yitzchak, and Mariv, the evening prayer, was instituted by Yaakov. The Talmud in Masechet Brachot says, why do we have three services? One answer is they correspond to rituals that were done in the temple, ritual offerings. The second answer is, no, it corresponds to the patriarchs. And then it goes on to say, Avraham instituted Shachrit, Yitzchak instituted Mincha, Yaakov instituted Mariv. Okay? How was that? And so let's first start with where the Talmud derives this from. I'm going down to the English. We're going to start with the Talmud. Okay? Near the top of page 2. Avraham established the morning prayer, as it says. Avraham rose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before God. Okay? I'm scrolling back up to the Hebrew. El HaMakom, second line on page 1, Asher Amad Sham et Penei Hashem, where he was standing. This is what the Talmud works with. Standing means prayer. How do we know that? Because of a verse in Psalms, Pinchas stood up and prayed. Okay? So, Vayamod Pinchas Vayifalel, near the end of line 2 in the Hebrew, at the top of the first page, right? Pinchas stood and prayed, la'amod. Therefore, and you understand, this is typical Midrash, therefore the word la'amod means to pray. And because it says Avraham Amad stood with God, that means Avraham prayed. Okay? So the Hebrew is important because that's going to be the whole basis of Rav Kook's thought about it. So far, we're still in the Midrash that's in the Talmud. Okay, Isaac, Yitzchak established the afternoon prayer near the top of page 2, back into the English, as it says, Yitzchak went out to converse in the field, lasuach basadeh. This is right before Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh, lifnot erev. Okay, third line in the Hebrew. Isaac went out to the field to. It's actually very hard to translate this word lasuach. It's an unusual biblical word. Before evening. And if you might remember, this is the passage where Rebecca was coming on the camels and she sees him out in the field. She says to Eliezer, the servant, who is that? Eliezer says, that's my master. And then she jumps off the camel and bows down. This is the scene of where Rivka and Yitzchak are going to meet for the first time before they get married. So lasuach means something. Siach in modern Israeli, which means conversation, but it kind of means, in English, it has a sense of musing, M-U-S, musing on something, thinking about something. In English, we might say, I'm thinking on it or I'm meditating about it, not in the sense of formal meditation, but, I'm thinking about that. I'm cogitating, musing, okay? How do we know that the word siach means that? Also in Psalms, a prayer of the afflicted when fainting pours out his siach before God. Here it's translated as complaint. I don't like that translation. It's more he pours out whatever is in his mind before God. Okay, so it means a variety of things: conversation, saying, musing, contemplating. Okay, so that verb, lasuach, or sicha is the noun, means prayer, and that's what Isaac did. And when did he do that? Right before evening time, mincha. Third patriarch, Yaakov, established the nighttime prayer, as it says, vayifga bamakom. Jacob encountered the place and spent the night there. When is that? When Jacob runs away from his family, heading out to Haran. He stops at Beit El, or he stops at a place where he sleeps, okay? And it says, Vayifga bamakom, he happened to encounter that place. Lifgoa means to encounter, it means to bump into. And bamakom, that place, although, of course, the Midrash says bamakom means the makom, right? Which is an epithet for God. And that's when Jacob has his dream about the ladder, right? The angel's going up and down the ladder, and he wakes up and he says, wow, this is a holy place. I didn't realize it. In other words, the key here is Yaakov Avinu did not seek to find that place. He just happened to go to sleep there. He encountered God. That's another way, good translation. Encounter, okay? Vayifga, encounter. And he woke up, he said, wow, I did not realize this is a holy place. Meaning he didn't plan to pray. He didn't know that that was a holy place. It was a chance encounter. From the human standpoint, chance, although, of course, there's no chance, okay? And how do we know that that word lifgoa means prayer? Another quote from Jeremiah, don't pray for them and do not tifga me, says God. God is saying to Jeremiah the prophet, hey, do not try to pray to me. Do not try to lifgoa be. Okay, that's how we know that that word means to pray. Here it's translated as make intercession, which is a reasonable translation in Jeremiah. So we have three words, la'amod, to stand, lasuach, to contemplate or muse, and lifgoa, to encounter. This is going to be the root of Rav Kook's drash. Okay, so far everything was just a quote of the Talmud. All right, everyone with me? So we basically have Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They established Shacharit, Mincha, and Mariv, respectively, and there's a passage from each of them, each one using a different verb, and each one of these verbs is seen in another passage in the Bible to mean prayer, which is the proof text for in the Midrash, how it means they prayed. And the first one is Vaya'amod, Amidah, standing. The second is Sicha, Lasuach. I'm going to call it musing, contemplating. And the third is Lifgoa, encounter. Michael, you with me? Okay. So Rav Kook goes on to say, where are we? I'm going back to the Hebrew. Maybe I didn't bold it. Did I bold it? I don't know. Okay, I didn't bold it. It's right under the bold in the Hebrew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line on page 1. Shalosh lishonot, where my cursor is. Shalosh lishonot elu. These three words, Amidah, Sicha, and Pigia, standing, conversing, and encountering. Mechuvanot hen, keneged shlosha inyanim, shel to'elet hatfilah ba'avodat Hashem yitbarach. These three different terms correspond to three different aspects of the purpose of prayer. Now I'm going back to the English on page 2. These three expressions, this is the translation from Sepharia, standing, conversing, and encounter, are aligned with, I would rather say they express or correspond to, the three principal aspects or purposes of prayer. Okay? Here's where we go. Now these three expressions, from there on, this is all Rav Kook's interpretation. Everything I said before that was just quoting the Talmud and explaining the Talmud. Okay. Now we're going on to Rav Kook. Okay. Michael, I'm pausing. Was there a hand? Is there a hand? No. Yes, no?
Yes.
Go ahead.
It occurs to me that another reason to conclude that Yitzhak was praying is that it says that he returned to the field.
He went out. Vayetze Yitzhak. He went out to the field. Go ahead.
Well, I thought it suggested a return later.
Well, he went out to the field, meaning it's before evening. What does one do? One is, he's a farmer. One has finished one's work. He's going out, right, to whatever one does after work. But we're going to see actually that Rav Kook is going to make use of this, Michael.
Okay, well, so what I was going to suggest,
go ahead.
That going out to the field after work means that he was likely going out and nobody else was there. So who else would he be conversing with?
Yes, presumably he was alone. Yes, that's implied in this. Correct. Good. Okay, so the first act of prayer is, I'm going to summarize what Rav Kook says, because I want to try to finish between 8:45 and 8:50. Okay? Shacharit, morning prayer, we're standing. What does standing mean?
For the Amidah.
The first act of prayer is to root firmly in the heart all the holy concepts and lofty images, okay, so that they will not falter under the storm winds which devastate morality and divine service. When are the storm winds going to happen? All day long, right? I'm going to go out into the world. I'm going to have business competitors. I'm going to have people who don't show up for their appointment. I'm going to have people who cut me off in traffic. I'm going to have someone who refuses to pay their bill. I'm going to have not enough money in my bank account. I'm going to have all kinds of tsaros during the day. Okay? All the normal vicissitudes that we encounter when we go out to the world and have our daily endeavors. He refers to that as the storm winds, which devastate morality and divine service. The things that happen during the day that are going to make me angry, are going to make me irritated, are going to make me want to be a nice person, not be a nice person, are going to make me want to cheat someone. Okay? This is kind of the rabbinic view of day-to-day life. The Yetzer Hara. Things happen that will arouse my Yetzer Hara. So what do I do first thing in the morning? I stand up straight, meaning I try to set my intentions for the day, right? This is how I want to serve God. This is what I believe in. And so we get, by the way, there's clearly a psychological aspect to this, right? Shachrit, we're preparing ourselves for the day. First thing in the morning, we're fresh, by the way, so think of it psychologically and emotionally. We're fresh. We're saying, these are my goals. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to this plan. All right. These are my goals and ideals. This is why he talks about morality and divine service. The primary time for this rooting, we root ourselves in these, I'm going to say, spiritual goals, is the morning. That happens before one turns to the business of life and the inevitable feelings of bodily desire. Bodily desire doesn't just mean food and sex. Bodily desire also means greed and competitiveness. He means, the matters of olam hazeh, this worldly matters, okay? Because I need to prepare a strong and well-founded moral posture, which will stand up under the oppositional trials of the waves of the times. The waves of the times means what's going to happen to me today. Therefore, the prayer which is oriented towards this activity is known as Amidah, standing. By the way, and then he links it to Abraham, that Abraham's quality is standing because Abraham was the one who stood through the 10 trials. Firmness, okay? So there's an aspect of prayer that is, I'm preparing myself to spiritually and morally stand firm today. That's one aspect of prayer which is embodied in Shachrit, and it makes sense that it fits with Abraham. Everyone with me on that? Does it kind of make sense? Okay, number 2, Mincha. Prayer is called Sicha. Now, he really goes off on Sicha here, Rav Kook. I thought he was going to take it in another direction. So I thought he was going to take it in the direction of, at the end of our day, we muse, we cogitate. Did I live up to my goals? Did I do mitzvahs? Did I do the right thing? How'd it go? Okay. End of the afternoon. He takes it in a different, which would make sense to me. He takes it in a different direction. He uses the word sicha and links it to the word sichim, which is Hebrew for bushes. And he says, this is about blossoming of the soul with new powers which branch out naturally through the excitation of the soul and the service and the heart. This is most fit to the time of the evening offering, the mincha offering, when one is close to casting off their troubles. Remember, mincha officially isn't really supposed to be 1:30 in the afternoon. It's supposed to be more like, 5, 6, depending on the time of day, okay? Basically, he links siach to bushes or shrubs, and he links it to the idea of growth. And he's basically saying, after the vicissitudes of our day, this is when we grow, or we might say regrow. I think this corresponds to, you sit down and you flop down in a chair and you breathe a sigh of relief that your work day is over. And you say, whew, I got to relax. I got to think. I haven't had a chance to sit down. Haven't had a chance to think. He refers to this as growing, blossoming. Okay? So it's interesting that when he's talking about Yitzchak, he is clearly talking about contemplation or musing. When he gets to his interpretive midrash, he changes the connotation of this to blossoming. But he also talks about close to casting off your troubles. And then back to blossoming, then your soul can elevate her nature. And the natural holy emotions stored up in her, the soul, I think, to join to the living God and overflow, sending out shoots and branches, taking the likeness of a mighty tree, one of the sichim, one of the plants. Okay? So he's kind of straddling here, growth, blossoming, with, I'm gonna try to combine the two, cogitation and blossoming. I'm going to use the word regeneration. Right? That's what we're doing when we flop down in the chair. Yep. No more calls to return. Although with the internet nowadays, there's, and accessibility. Sadly, we all complain about this. There's no such thing as no more calls to return, right? Let's call it regeneration. Shachri, standing. Mincha, regeneration. You can think of this of contemplation, cogitation, musing, blossoming. Okay. Now we're up to Mariv. Prayer is called encounter, as when one happens upon something. Okay. Not only because of the path that I took near the bottom of page 2, but also because of the immanent, which means present, nearness of the one encountered. So it was for our father Yaakov. And Rav Kook links this to prophecy. Yaakov had a prophecy. It was an encounter. This befits the nighttime prayer. Why? Because at night, things pop into our head. Oh, I forgot about that. I didn't think about that. Oh, you know what? I got to call someone. I got to do that thing tomorrow. That make sense? So Rav Kook says nighttime, which is quiet time, is when we are able to bump into things. That's what the sense of encounter is. I bumped into something that I was not quite expecting. And that's what pigia is, lifgoa. So what he says is, I'm going to summarize, and he says there's 3 aspects to prayer, and they each have a psychological dimension. Standing myself up firm, amidah. Sicha, what's the word I used? Musing and regeneration. 3rd, encounter. And he goes and he talks about these things that are limbs. And this is a rejoinder to those who say, why do we say the same Amidah 3 times a day? He says, they're all limbs. I have 4 limbs. You wouldn't say, oh, gee, I have 4 limbs. I don't really need that arm. Would you say that? You wouldn't say that. You'd say each limb has a function. So he refers to these prayers as limbs. These are limbs, each of which, near the bottom of page 3, each of which has their own intrinsic value. And if one is lost, another cannot fill its place. Each of the 3 prayers, fixed in their times, is aligned with a particular aspect of the service of prayer in such a manner that it cannot be considered a redundant limb, that at the very least, one proper prayer will rise up from among the 3. Therefore, each one requires particular care in itself. I hope of those 3 things, I get at least one of them right. Either standing myself up firm for the day, conversing and blossoming and regenerating. Notice it says here near the top of page 4, after the intensity of the mundane concerns of the day, and the nighttime through, he calls it the purification of thoughts and musings, meaning the things that we have a chance to pop into our head. You might think of it as, in the morning I'm getting emotionally, in the morning I'm getting ready for the day. I'm going to stop screen sharing. At the end of the day, at the end of the work day, I am, at the morning I'm getting ready for the work day. What's ahead of me? At the end of the afternoon, towards evening, mincha, I'm musing, blossoming, regenerating. At night, we might say, I'm just letting the mind be free. Things pop into my head. I encounter them. Ideas pop in. Memories pop in. We've all had that experience of memories pop into your head. Things that you wanted to do that you didn't accomplish pop into your head. And he links this actually to prophecy, meaning it's the moment when things that we didn't plan on, we encounter. Those bad English. Things when we encounter things that we didn't, times when we encounter things that we didn't necessarily plan on. So Rav Kook links these 3 aspects to the 3 prayers, Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv, and says this is why there are different times of day, even though superficially you think it's the same Amidah. Each prayer has a different psychological and emotional tone based on the rhythm of the day. And I'm going to call it preparation, regeneration, and I'm not quite sure what to call the third one. My children refer to that when encounter. They refer to that as random. That's what the young people say. Random. I mean, things that pop into your head, which of course are not random, right? But chance, I don't want to say chance encounter, okay? Which he says has to do with getting another way of looking at it is morning, preparing your faith to stand firm as you prepare to go to the vicissitudes of the day. Number 2, letting your soul re-blossom after the vicissitudes of the day. Number 3, the moments of prophecy, which are the moments of encountering God in an unexpected way. That's why there are 3 prayers, and that's why they're linked to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I thought that Rav Kook's midrash on the midrash was psychologically and emotionally interesting. That's why I brought it, right? So the midrash links it to just, the original midrash just links it to words and these 3 different verbs, and it just says these 3 verbs each mean prayer. What Rav Kook is doing is taking a step further and say, these 3 words each mean prayer, but actually they each mean different aspects of prayer. They are not synonyms. They actually have different connotations from each other, different aspects of prayer spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally, which are naturally tied to 3 different times of the day. I'm going to pause for a minute or 2 to see if there's any thoughts about any of that. You can say it doesn't work that way for me or anything like that. That's his suggestion. Terry, was that a hand? It was sort of a Terry.
No, I think it's just it's lovely.
Okay.
I haven't decided yet exactly how I feel about it in terms of my prayer, but I just think it's lovely.
Right. So how you might feel about it as in terms of your prayer, I'm going to say maybe he's giving us his formulation, his understanding, which is perhaps a suggestion. I could put it that way, right? This is his suggestion of how these things are different. By the way, speaking personally for me, more the moment of encounter is kind of when I'm in bed. So I think of that as like, that's the 4th prayer, which is Shema time in bed, where it's like, I forgot that. I got to call that person. You know what? I'm thinking of my kid, right? It's the time when sort of we let our thoughts roam, okay? And again, the way we tend to daven, which I'm not sure is the way they tended to daven, the way we tend to daven, Mincha, Mariv, one service, one after the other, doesn't exactly fit this neatly. I mean, the way we tend to daven at our shul, Temple Beth Am, that's what I meant about that, which is kind of what most shuls do because they're not going to get people. But, if you work in the Diamond District, you'll get Mincha, or Wall Street, you'll find a Mincha in the middle of the afternoon, and then Mariv is at like 9:30 at night after your shiur that you attend or something like that, right? So, in sort of the core formulation, they're really very separate, Mincha and Mariv. We tend not to experience them that way in our institutional synagogue-oriented prayer structure. We'll conclude with that. Be Torah, stay healthy. Please meditate about Rav Kook's meditations about meditation and your Shachrit, your Mincha, and your Mariv, your 3 times a day psychologically. We're taking 4 weeks off. God willing, we'll reconvene July 22.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.